5 quick tricks to make sure that the website you're building meets accessibility standards. So what do we mean by accessibility standards? Basically, these days, our websites are required by law, at least in the United States, to be accessible, meaning that people who use assistive devices to look at your website or people that have disabilities have to be able to access the content on your website. Just like someone who's entering a building who maybe has a wheelchair is able to get into the building through the use of ramps and other features of the building, like extra wide doorways, so that they aren't hampered by their disability. In the same way, these same ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act, laws apply to the internet. What does that mean? It means that your website needs to be accessible to those with disabilities, people who are blind, people who have low vision, people who have hearing issues. I think a lot of people are unaware that this is something they need to do. But my job here is to help educate you about these issues and how best, as a designer and developer who builds websites, you can follow these standards and make sure that the sites that you build for others meet these guidelines. So what are the 5 quick tricks to make sure that you're following these guidelines? The first trick is that you should declare the language of your website. And this is a quick one where you basically use the lang, L-A-N-G attribute, and you set it to the language of your website. So for example, for English, that would be EN. And you add this attribute to your HTML element tag. So every website, every page needs to have the language of the site declared, and typically that's the language of hypertext markup language, or HTML. So in your HTML element tag, you need to add the lang, or L-A-N-G attribute, and set it to the value of EN for English, if that is the language of your website. And the second quick trick is that you should provide alt or alternative text to any image that is on your website. That means you need to visually describe all the pictures that are on your website so that someone with low vision or someone who is blind can still access the content of that image, because the text that you provide as alt text or alternative text tells them what is in that image and why it is relevant to your website. And a third trick is that you need to make sure that all of your buttons are labeled in such a way that it tells the user where they are going if they click that link. So, for example, vague descriptions like click here don't really tell you where they're going if someone clicks in that link. So you really should tell people, if you click this link, you're gonna download the white paper, for example, that you're actually telling people with your labels what is gonna happen if that link is clicked. And in addition to making sure the text is clear, that tells people where the link is going, you also have to include what's called aria-labels. And these aria-labels are what's visible to assistive devices, so screen readers that people may be using to navigate your website. And the assistive device will actually read the aria-label on the link. So not only should the text be clear that's visible to people who visit your users, but the text in the aria-label should be clear so that the person using the assistive device gets the same information. And then a fourth quick trick is to make sure that you're using good semantic markup. What does that mean? So semantic markup introduced elements that actually describe the role of that element on your web page. So for example, we now have semantic elements that tell the people who are visiting the site what part of the website is the header, what part of the website is the footer, what part of the website contains the main content. What if an element is defining a section of your website, and then those sections can be further differentiated by adding aria-labels that describe what content is in that section. And also you can create articles. Articles are basically self-contained independent items that, if taken out of context from that particular website, would still work. So these tend to be things like blog posts. So a blog post is kind of a syndicated element that can be used on any website, really. It needs to be able to make sense on its own without the context of the full website. That is what an article is. And an aside is basically a sidebar element. So something that is only peripherally related to the main content is considered an aside. So you should be using these semantic markup terms to label the sections of your website, and that helps you make your site accessible, because these are the labels that are being presented to the assistive device to tell the user, who may not be able to visually see what's going on your website. What is the main content, what is not so relevant, like an aside. And then the last quick trick, the fifth quick trick that you can do for your website is provide video and audio transcripts. So for someone who needs that extra information, that they can read the content of your video or read the content of your audio, because perhaps they cannot hear, they cannot actually get the audio, then by providing the transcript, you're making that content available to them. So that is important for accessibility purposes. And also, we are in a world these days where a lot of people can go to your website and they can't really access the sound right away because of their environment. So they rely on transcripts and subtitles and captioning to get the content of things like video. That is also helpful from an accessibility standpoint. So just to recap, we want to declare the language of our website. We want to use alternative text. We want to use good semantic markup. We want to use transcripts. And we want to use labels on our buttons and links that make it clear where the user is being sent. These are the things that you can do to make sure that your websites are accessible. Presented by Designers Learn Code.